How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk, T-I-E-R Talk. Sorry about that. A little excited. When you get excited, it makes me stumble on my words. All right, guys, this is going to be a great topic. We're going to talk about being creative. Now, listen, I know it's scary. You want to say the word being creative, and a lot of people may equate being creative to taking risk. And do we want to take risk in a correctional environment? So we have a lot to discuss here because if you don't take risk, if you're not creative, then we don't grow and we don't develop. So there is some level of calculated risk in the efforts to be creative and grow. And plus, there's enjoyment when you're creative. So we want to talk about ways to encourage creativity in the workplace, if you will. My guest today is going to be Connie Alleyne. But before I bring her on, I just want to go over our sponsor. First, we have American Military University. If you guys get a chance, please check out American Military University. They're very supportive of what we do in corrections, very supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. And again, if you want to get that degree and bring experience into the classroom, this is the place. Trust me, guys. They will support you and they will help you get that degree. Just on a side note, my department is hiring. So if you're looking to work for the NJDOC, we are called Senior Correctional Police Officers, or if you want to cross onto the civilian side, we also have openings there as well. So if you guys get a chance, check out their website, as you can see, njdoc.gov. I have the two books on the market, guys. We have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. That's now available. That book is doing very well. In the last 90 days, over 200 copies sold. And I think we're about 10 copies already in the month of April. So that thing just picks up a lot of traction. But again, it's a good training manual to give to your people. And we also have Lessons Learned While Working in Prison, My Journey from Officer to Administration. That's also available. A link to that is also in the description. That book is starting to get some steam as well. That's just a lot of tips and advice in there, not just from me, but from other people in the profession, people that have walked the walk. We also have our posters. Those are also available. Posters that you can hang at your facility. It's signs that you're overly involved with an inmate. Those posters are actually doing very well. If you're looking to get those posters, the email for that is nassahs22@gmail.com. That's the same posters that we also utilize for our webinars. And by the way, guys, this webinar is now available on demand. It's the first part of the 5 levels of leadership. It's about 2 hours and 13 minutes. It's $75. If you guys are interested, please email that same email I mentioned before about the posters, nassahs22@gmail.com. And again, it's $75 a person. The video is 2 hours and 13 minutes, and it's very informative. It's about the first level of leadership, its position, and it's modeled off of our experiences in the profession, but it's modeled off of some teachings from John Maxwell's books, The 5 Levels of Leadership, the 21 Laws of Leadership. And then we also touched on a little bit on how successful people lead, which is pretty much a shortened version of the 5 Levels of Leadership. But we really dived in and had a very fun discussion. And the next one we'll be working on is before we do part 2 of the 5 Levels of Leadership, we're going to be working on this one next, which is navigating your impact on rookie staff. That's in the process. That's going to be a dialogue, but we'll have that up in 2 weeks. But again, if you guys are interested, email that, and we can deliver that webinar, this one right here, specific time, date, whatever you want it. We could do it that way. You pay through PayPal, and then just tell us the date and time you want it, and then I will send you a link. And then once that day occurs, you click the link, and it plays. And if by chance you miss it, not the end of the world, just let me know, and I'll send it again. Connie, that was a big intro there, but it's worth it. Gotta promote the hard work.
You had a lot to say. I think that's all good news, though. When you
I'm
got
taking your advice, Connie.
When you got a lot to introduce, that's like you're doing stuff out there.
I'm taking your advice. You're a businesswoman too, and I think what I want to do is, when it comes to the success, I want to have stuff that I can fall back in and not always lean on external sources. I need something that I can call my own, and I've been having people that have been helping. You give me always all-star advice. Sandy's more organized than me, so she's able to organize these other things because I can't. You know that. I suck at that. So, but and also I forgot I got Tier Talk cups. Link to that is also in the description. Let me just, how do I get out of that now? There you go. Hey, Con, you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am Connie Alleyne. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. We have the academy offering all year round. It is on demand as well. It's self-paced. Essentially, you can sign up for those 8 modules. We've not been marketing to individuals because institutions have been sort of scooping it up and sort of buying their slots for their folks. And it's been quite the journey to get the academy out there for everyone. I'm also the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. It continues to sell. I haven't been doing a lot of promotional anything these days. It's just life has just been hectic. And so in all of that, it's the excitement of all the stuff happening and just being able to see you and I from when we first started, January 17th. I'll never forget.
That's what it was.
Yeah, it was January. It was my birthday. It was my birthday 4 years ago, right? Or 5 years ago that we started this journey. Somewhere around there.
It's a good while now. Ever since Gary Cornelius looked this up. Hey, I have, while you do your intro, let me see if I can find one of your first.
Oh my God.
First video. Well, let's see. But so real quick, if somebody wanted to connect with you for the Civilian Correction Academy, how would they do that?
Sure. Just email info@civiliancorrections.academy and we get people all hooked up. We do have like an enrollment document that we have everyone fill out. And once you're all squared away, we send you your own individual login to the system where you can go ahead and start training. And upon completion of each module, you receive a certificate of correctional readiness. Why can't I talk tonight? Okay. And then once you've completed the whole thing, we are certifying folks as correctional ready, which has been an interesting journey doing that because we've had at least one state so far have to go to court on someone who said they were never trained on that. And I was like, ooh, you were never trained on that?
I take advantage of that.
Wait a minute. I'm a curriculum office, all of that, right? And so the fact that they had like a solid record of correctional training as a non-uniform staff person, and they could say, no, we did train them on this. Here's the content. Because what we also do is kind of produce the transcript of the training in the event that someone needs it. So that was awesome.
That's pretty cool, Connie. Yeah. And as I said, you're filling in a gap. It's not done. Now, I found a video from 3 years ago.
Oh my God.
It's at over 18,000 views.
Wow.
And it's just you going solo. The title is, Are You a Correctional Nurse? Here are some tips to provide to this profession of being a correctional nurse. Now, guys, this is her from just 3 years ago, but Connie, you got to explain the thought that's going on in your mind because I screenshotted it just at the perfect time.
That is not, I don't know what that is. No.
Wait, here it goes. What is going on in your mind at that point? Wait, look. I know what I want to say, but I don't want to say it because I don't want to lose my job. But I know what it looks like. Yeah, I know you're telling a story about some shit with an inmate right there. I know some manipulation shit is in this one, guys. Look at that. I got the perfect timing on that. Oh, God. I'm not gonna play it because it's probably something like it's not going. But I think it's like some inmate's trying to play you. You're in the middle of telling a story. Yeah, so guys, this will be a good show. Oh, let me just I screenshot that. You know what I'll do, Connie, just so you have it as a memory.
I don't need it.
No? Okay. Hey, but that video is over. Hey, you know what? Real quick, just we're having a little fun here. 18,000 views, and almost what 340 likes. It's not bad for what we do in a niche. Well done, Connie. So that video is having an impact somewhere. 18,000 views is no joke. I don't care what anybody says. Again, remember, we're in a niche. So, guys, that's pretty impressive, by the way. So, if you want, you could take that video, put it, download it and put it on your own website, if you want. It's a good video. Great advice there. Yeah, it's great advice, Yeah. Hey, maybe we could do a class on, maybe some tips for correctional nursing. Hey, why not? Make a couple of bucks. Okay, so the name of the show is called Leadership is About Creativity. Now, guys, there is a difference between leadership and management, obviously, and the thoughts that we're going to share are also going to be coming from John Maxwell's book called Leader Shift. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and apply some of his thoughts or some of his theories to us, to our profession. Granted, leadership is about creativity. Basically, his argument here is that management is about maintaining, which he's not knocking it. You need people to maintain things, but leadership is always about creativity. It's dealing with the human element. And I'm sure, Connie, you would agree with that, right? The main difference between leadership and management could really be shifting from maintaining to being creative and trying new things, correct?
Yeah. And I mean, I think also too, from leadership, you're kind of, from a leadership perspective, you're more looking at bigger picture. From a management perspective, you're managing sort of the day-to-day tasks that need to get accomplished, right? So instead of the operational level, and leadership is more at a higher level, sort of executing a vision, if you will.
No, you're right. I mean, that's the key. And visions, sometimes as we evolve as an agency, you need people that are creative. Now, Connie, when I was driving home today, you mentioned something, or was it yesterday? Because it was yesterday. We knew we were going to do this show. And the moment I said it, me and you were in sync with something, and you did say it out loud. You said, ooh, creativity and corrections. Wouldn't that be seen as a risk? And I see how they equate. No, but you're right. I mean, this is corrections because here's the thing, guys. In corrections, obviously, across all departments, there's always going to be the concern of a consequence of taking a risk and being wrong. I mean, there's a difference between, let's say, a major consequence or like something that requires a course redirection, But having said that, it's a bit of a balance because if you're not creative, we also never grow. I mean, we're growing, and I learned something recently where, if you don't match the pace of the outside world, you're going to be left behind.
Absolutely.
Right. So you have to have people that are understanding what's happening on the outside world and then do what they can to keep up with that pace. So when we say creativity, it isn't an effort, or it's calculated. It isn't an effort to move things forward. But having said that, you have to move forward, and we do want creativity. Okay, would you agree to that, Connie? Or
so I think we do want creativity, but we want creativity with critical thinking. We don't want it to be just a massive departure from policy and procedure, because I want people to understand that that's why some folks hesitate to become creative in corrections, right? Because I can't veer off from policy and procedure. Like, I'm not going to be supported. And so it's not saying that you throw policy away. I think creativity in this space is, how do we take the parameters or the goalposts, right, of our policies and procedures and weave it into something that allows us to still accomplish the mission, but we went about it a different way. And I think there's a level of empowerment that the staff have to feel in order for us to get into a space where we're creative and we're able to kind of show, I was still using policy, but here are some variables that came into play at the time. And so I needed to get creative with accomplishing this thing, whatever the thing is. I know for me, one of the experiences that I had that was really challenging was there was always this push for us to minimize overtime, right? And how do you do that, right? It's not always cutting a post, right? That's not usually always feasible, right? And it's not sustainable long term, right? But how do I minimize overtime? So we were looking at staffing minimums. We were looking at tasks that were being done in the different clinics. And, was there some sort of way for us to cut down on how often we were, how many staff we had staffed in one unit versus the other? And could there be a floater? Could there be someone who did this and then went and did that? Like, their job was to do multiple things in a day instead of having one stable post for the day. And it's stuff like that, we're still working within the confines of the expectations as well as our policy and procedure. But the way we went about making it happen every day was sort of the way that we were able to, I guess, get creative without too much risk.
Well, but Connie, as you mentioned, I like what you said, where it's calculated. I mean, you are creative, but maybe there is some parameters if that makes sense. Because again, I know there's a lot of people that will be quick to say, yo, I'm not trying anything new, Gange, because the risk of failure, I get it. But
Or
the
the
problem,
consequences for failure.
yeah, the consequences of failure. So again, I want to let people know something. I mean, there's always going to be failure, but we're also supposed to have tons of fail safes in place. When Connie mentioned before about calculated, I guess you want to call creativity, maybe there's always that safety net, because at the end of the day, we have to support each other. I think that when it comes to being creative, one of the first things that it mentions, you have to build a creative culture. And I think a big part of that comes with trust. Now, Maxwell, just a quick sentence here, says, if you lead a team, department, or organization, take responsibility for promoting creativity and building a creative culture. He basically talks about something in a book that he had, but I think trust is a big component. So we're going to take, in an effort to be creative, obviously there's a chance that you could fail. Connie had mentioned before too, the intent of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. So Connie mentioned the idea about the post, and that's a good intent. And of course we want to bring people to the table, shoot some ideas and give it a shot. Now, the last thing you want is to have a leader who's CYA all the time. My person makes a bad mistake. Let me first remove myself from being connected to them and let me throw them under the bus. Because if you have a culture where there's no trust, where if you're afraid to make mistakes because you have a supervisor who is insecure or just, always quick to cover their own ass and separate themselves from the failure or whatever, separate themselves from the team because they made an initiative that didn't work, well, you're never going to have that creative culture, because without trust, people aren't going to take risk. And yes, guys, creativity has some level where there is a risk because you're trying something new. But I also feel somewhere along the line, creativity could also be cultivated where, yeah, there could be risk, but it's minimized as long as we have, evaluated, like Connie said, some level of control and parameters where we know where these possibilities could be to some extent of if there is a failure. Again, not everything's predictable, but you're keeping things within this these parameters, like as you mentioned, Connie, like some type of calculated creativity. But
I think to your point about failure, right? Like if we're going to create a culture where we support folks being creative, right? Like I think it matters that if someone does fail, we don't use that as an opportunity to ream this person out, right? Like if anything, we use that as an opportunity to bring everybody together and sort of talk about like, okay, so here's what went wrong, right? And what could we have done better? What could we have different? Whatever the situation, and not in a way that it feels like a Monday morning quarterback, but in a way that we're learning from each other because everyone is going to bring a different perspective to the table. And all too often when these things happen, the consequences are handled in a bubble. And I think we don't use them as learning opportunities for the rest of the staff. Because I think when the rest of the staff sees that you didn't get reamed out and kicked to the curb, right? But we did come together and we talked about it. And as a group, we were trying to figure out what was some alternatives, right, that we could have employed at the time. I think that's where the creativity, like the spark is like, oh, people just start to like, so I can look at it differently, right? It's almost like building that culture, that culture of creativity sort of gives permission, right? It's okay for us to look at things a little differently. You're not going to be penalized for having independent thought. And I think that's the message that we want to be able to send out.
Yeah, and I love that. And we also have to be wary of the excuses that are just excuses for us not to move forward. I mean, sometimes we'll use safety and security as our generalized excuse not to move forward. And you have to ask yourself, are we just falling back on that because it's safety, or, maybe it's safety, whatever it is, or maybe there's some level where we don't want to take accountability, if something goes wrong. I mean, that's a big part of having a very creative culture, is that it also, if works out right, you could build investment from the individuals who want to help it move forward, especially if it's a team thing, and also could build some level of accountability with the individuals, because I'm invested, This was the idea of the team, but we all contributed, as Connie said. So having said that, now we're all going in as owners of this. Right. And then if it falls backwards, hypothetically, we all take the accountability of that together. Because, guys, we talked about in a show just recently, accountability is not really it's not a negative thing. I know the definition makes it look negative, where it's a look backwards. You know, accountability is stepping up for whatever choices were made, and it makes it look backwards. But there is a better definition that I actually saved that is more positive. The definition is accountability is a personal choice to rise above one's circumstances and demonstrate the ownership necessary for achieving desired results. To see it, own it, solve it, and do it. So having said that, to me, that's a more proactive approach that would fall into, hey, guys, let's be creative. Let's try this out. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, that's fine. We all were invested, and we'll just, you know, go in as a team. But the key is to get that investment so everybody is equally involved in the success. Or if there's a failure, let's all get together and really put our minds together to see what we're
I think you should go back to your statement about safety, right? Because because safety is like, so it's safety and security, right? Like operationally, but then there's safety. Like, do I feel safe to be creative, right? Do I feel safe to suggest something that isn't sort of the perception or the belief of the majority, right? Because I think that's a big part of it, right? Like the safety isn't just safety, security. It's also, am I safe to give an opinion that's different from everyone else's, right? Am I going to be supported? Because that's part of the creativity. It's someone is looking at things from a different perspective. Maybe they have a different lens, or maybe different experience that's informing them to like say, oh, maybe we could try this thing. And I think the safety piece is, do I feel safe to speak up and say, like, hey, why don't we try this, right? And what have we done to create an environment where someone can kind of step up and speak against sort of the status quo and bring forward some brand new ideas? So I think your point about safety is like a really big point that we shouldn't skip over.
I appreciate that, because I was going to say something. If you work in a culture that there's no trust, which means it doesn't allow you the chance to be creative, and we'll get into some of the other points, but more so being empowered and making decisions, and we're going to hit that point up. But I want to add something here, is that the safety becomes stagnation. It does, right? Because I'm afraid that I'm going to get in trouble for any move I make that could shake the boat, right? So what happens here is I wind up not being creative, because for me, that's safety for me. You know,
there's something on a t-shirt that you should be putting up there. Safety becomes.
Wait, are you still? Wait, that's supposed to be the me to you. Wait, what did you like there? What was it just now?
Safety can become stagnation. That's crazy. That's a good one.
I just thought that's a Gangi, guys. That's mine. No, because I fed off what we were saying. Because as I said, if you have a culture, guys, that doesn't allow for freedom of creativity, whatever it is, because you have management that's CYA. I mean, that's the big concern here. Creativity is easily going to be obstructed by people that are CYA, 100%. You know, I'm not going to be creative if I feel that I take a risk. I'm going to quickly get in trouble. So I think the security comes at that point where people just like, okay, I'll just remain stagnant and not move, because that's the safest bet for me. So what do you get? You know what you get, Connie, at the end of the day? You get just enough employees that do just enough, because the safety comes from the fact that I'm not going to move. I'm not going to rock the boat.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So guys, that was definitely good. But again, culture of trust. I think that matters. What did you write down there?
I just wrote that down. Safety can become stagnation. Gangi 4/5/23.
Where's that going?
I don't know.
We'll
I feel
figure it
like
out.
It needs to go somewhere.
All right. Yeah. Let's not sit on that one.
I don't want us to forget that one.
Well, let's make a teamwork. Put Gangi and Connie. Yeah. No. Put Gangi and Connie, because you inspire me.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Gangi and Connie, and then I'll wear it. But your face will sell more than mine.
Oh, get out of here.
So now we'll put on that picture we took before. Now this matters, guys. I'll have Connie go first because we'll alternate each other's thoughts. I went first. Did I go first last time? I don't want to put a bias. So we'll have you go first this time, ladies first. But when it comes to fuel passion, let me just read his thoughts so we kind of know, because this to me is important. Because when you do work in a creative culture, there's risk, obviously, as we talked about. So there's kind of like the trial and error of things. And I want to read what he said because this matters to me. Creativity requires time, tenacity, testing, options, U-turns, imagination, questions, failures, and change. All these things require a lot of energy. Passion provides the fuel. Connie, there's a lot there. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, passion is that thing that makes you not quit, right? Passion is that thing that makes you not give up even when things are going badly. So I think that sometimes in the environment that we're in, it can be very challenging, right? To stay positive, to seek out alternatives, to try to find solutions, to try to be creative, right? And so I think having a passion, which would be that thing that's within you, that's going to help you to work those long hours, that's going to help you to not give up or to not quit or to not walk out or to not show up, right? Like I think passion is a thing that says, all right, we're going to figure this out, right? And sometimes we may feel a little beaten down, and so maybe the passion might not be there, right? But all you need just my personal feeling about it is that when the passion is genuine, like there is an authentic passion about this thing, it doesn't really matter that you had the feeling that you wanted to walk away. Something in you is going to bring you back because you have a passion for the thing that you're doing. So many times people say, Connie, why are you still doing correction stuff? You've already gone to do your book and you this and you that. And I'm like, this is what I'm passionate about though, right? Like, yeah, I enjoy all the other facets of life and stuff that I'm engaged in, but like, I'm passionate about this. And like, who else is going to have me on a podcast at 9:25 at night?
Is that the time?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I have this thing that's from Simon Sinek. I like this. It's kind of right in line with what you're saying, and it's a quote that I want to read off to you. I'm putting it in the search engine now because something you just said. Here it goes. Working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. I think that's powerful how you just said that just now because I agree with that. I know the difference too. Trust me. There'll be times where I'm overwhelmed and I'm just not feeling it. And usually it comes with the monotonous work that may come your way that just doesn't stop. At the end of the day, it's more of the routine stuff, but it just doesn't stop. And then there's times where you're overwhelmed with something that's new and pioneering and you're invested in where this is going. It's exciting because it's new. And I understand the difference where, one is, it's about, in my mind, the outcome. I love when we're trailblazing something new and everybody's putting their effort in and then one day sitting back to see what we've built, as opposed to getting caught up in the routine. So I agree, but does it take a lot of effort? 100%, because it's not going to be perfect. So whatever you're trying to implement, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to go roundabout. But you know what the funny thing is? I don't even know if even in corrections right now, I don't think anything's ever perfect. I mean, think about it. Inmates be finding loopholes in everything we do. So obviously there's nothing that's ever going to be perfect. But I think the outcome is to be better than best, because best is also settling. I'm not looking to be the best. I'm just looking to be better. And I think that when it comes to things that I truly enjoy and truly love, when you're going through all that crazy stuff of, things that could look to knock you down and discourage you, it's passion that keeps you going because you know that at the end, it's all going to be worth it. And that's what I think. I think you have to be able to understand that everything you're doing has value. For me as management, I always try to let my people know that what they do has value. I look to appreciate them, but specifically appreciate them. And then I hope that through that value, they discover some level of passion, and also eventually bring out some level of creativity in the long run in how we do things. But I think passion really, I love that. I think passion does fuel us through creativity, because in the end, it's really trial and error, trial and error, and trial and error, and just keep on doing it until finally it turns out to be something that you can work with. So I thought that was powerful. I'll do this one first. This one's my turn. So I have foster autonomy. So here he has a quick thought on this. His thought is, well, he starts with George S. Patton. He says, never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. What he was really talking about was allowing people to have enough autonomy to be creative. Micromanagement undermines creativity, while freedom and flexibility foster it. We've taught this, guys, many times before. As leadership, we may delegate the what, but you push down the how to allow people to kind of figure out how things have to be maneuvered. I myself never like to be micromanaged, because I like the autonomy to figure out how things need to be done, and then try to have some ownership in that. Because if you're micromanaging individuals, the problem is they never get a chance to take true ownership of the work being done. Mm-hmm. And through ownership, I also mean some level of accountability. Success or failure, they're not able to embrace either one. They're not able to embrace any level of success as their own, or they're not able to embrace the failure. So having said that, fostering autonomy really comes from allowing our people to be out there and making decisions. And we're going to touch on that into a little more later when it comes to minimizing the hierarchy. But in this case here, it kind of falls into the same thing, where I have to have trust. And when I'm able to have trust, I'm able to give out the assignments, but then let them figure out the how. Usually what happens here is, if you don't have trust, your leadership does turn out to be very micromanaging, because I don't, you know what? You're in the position, but I don't trust you, so I'm going to micromanage you. And then what you have in return is the front line feeling, you must think I'm incompetent, because I know how to get through. I know how to get through the alphabet here, but you've taken me A, B, C, D, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really allow them to be creative, to think things through. And then the scariest thing out of it all, and we talked about this in other shows, is that you wind up getting people that become reliant on you now to make decisions. So they're not being trained as leaders. They're just going to lean on you for that level of decision making and ultimately accountability. But yeah, that's a big thing, right? Delegate the what, push down the how. What's your thoughts on that, Connie?
I mean, so the fostering autonomy is a big deal, I think. So on one end, yes, we want to make sure that folks feel empowered to make decisions on their own, right? But when they don't have that level of autonomy, there's also a bottleneck that's created, right? Like, so where I might have been able to make a decision on my own, all of a sudden I have to ask 5 million people before I make a decision, right? And so I think in our environment, we don't really have the luxury of time, right? So you don't always have the ability to ask 5 million people, right? And so when you don't have that level of autonomy, could there be some safety and security concerns, because people may freeze and not make a decision at all because they've never been trusted to use their own common sense, right? But the other side to that is, when folks do have autonomy and they do have the ability to kind of troubleshoot, we allow for them to build new skills, right? We allow for them to look at things differently, like, oh, what do I need to do? And the fact that they're going to come up with what they need to do in order to make it happen, right? They may not know how to do this particular thing, but I bet you they're going to figure it out, right? Because you've given them the authority to make the decision. And so people don't want to disappoint. I think in general, like if somebody, your boss comes say, hey, I need you to take care of this, you want to see that through. You want to take care of it. You want to be able to give a status update at the end and say mission complete, right? Nobody wants to go back to their boss and be like, well, I couldn't. And because your boss doesn't want to hear that either, right? So I think being able to give that autonomy to the front line, to the staff, to be able to go out and like make things happen. And for them, I mean, I think honestly, we would be surprised at the how they came about this. Why did you think that was the right thing to do? Because here's all the things that were happening. We might not even think that they're thinking so broadly. Right. And so I think this also allows for us to learn what are the things that they are exposed to on a day-to-day basis that actually gives them the skills and the tools they need to function in a more autonomous manner.
Well, I agree. And I think also when like what you're saying, when you're trying to micromanage, you're also pushing out a very limited perspective of how things you may feel should be done.
Your perspective.
Right. And you're not allowing, and there's growth there too, because, actually, you might as well cross into the next one. Hold on. We might as well cross into minimizing hierarchy, because this is going to be, because it's blended. In creative environments, decisions are made closest to the problem. That's powerful. That's basically telling you that the front line, the knowledge workers, are the ones that are making decisions. They're the decision makers. And also, they're the ones that are solving problems that you at the highest level may not even know exist. So they're moving around every day, figuring out these things.
Every day.
Right. And then it goes, for that to happen, leaders need to minimize the number of layers between the top and the bottom. He goes, a few years ago, I read an article by Robert Kaplan in which he interviewed now retired General Stanley McChrystal, who said this. I like this. Any complex task is best approached by flattening hierarchies. It gets everybody feeling like they're in the inner circle so that they develop a sense of ownership. I think for this matters to me because in administration, I oversee areas that I have no experience in. So I'm really not in a position to have the answers. That's one thing. So I am very reliant on my department heads and my front line, my knowledge workers, to give me all the possible solutions. The only time I may see myself getting involved is if solutions involve multiple departments. Now it's the solution, but I got to also account for what's best for the departments if a solution is going to occur that can involve that. But it's not so much I'm getting involved in the solution at the root. It's just more of the impact of that solution, and then basically dealing with it there. But usually when it comes to the specific solution, you got to lean on your decision makers, which are the ones that are closest to the ground. Because as we said, if they're solving a lot of problems that you don't even know about, and they're working on this day in, day out, every day, their skill, if you give them that autonomy that Connie had mentioned, their skill and their ability is way past what yours will ever be, because you're not on the floor doing it every day, and you're not on the floor dealing with the problems that they're dealing with every day. So whether it's maintenance, medical, or just, running that housing unit and seeing the different ways inmates try to circumvent, the more that the staff is exposed to, the more that they start gaining the ability to kind of maneuver better. As long as they're evaluating those experiences and as long as they're learning, they are becoming experts in the field. And I have a feeling that when you have an expert in the field going against a jack of all trades, you go back to the expert in the field, because obviously they're an expert in the field for the reason. Why? Because they're doing it every day. They're doing, 1 hour a day for 5 years can make you an expert in anything if you're really devoted to it and wanting to learn and evaluate. So you got people on the floor making decisions and evolving, adapting and adjusting every day, and you're going to sit there and micromanage that? Are you insane? That's insane to me. And as I said, the flattening part is great too, because you want to, I like what he said there. You flatten it out so everybody feels that they're together to solve the problem. So that's one thing. It's great when you can pull away from the position and say, how are we going to do this as a team, and allow the individuals to feel like they're part of an inner circle, like bring them in. I love that. And then the other thing is, the more layers, you're further away from the problem, but you're the one that has the final approval. It's like, but you're the furthest away. So you want to keep some level of approval the closest to the ground line where it's happening. I love when I have management that pretty much says, hey, what have you done? That's great. Okay, copy that. Thank you for letting me know. As opposed to, we're going to do it this way and pass it down. I usually tell my people, okay, what was the problem you had? Fine. And what did you do to try to solve it? Because they're in the best position to figure it out. Then they tell you, or they go over a few solutions, and then you work to find out what's the best. But Connie, what's your thoughts about, kind of combining what you said with the minimizing the hierarchy? It does combine.
So I think the minimizing the hierarchy is probably more critical than we think it is, right? Like, because in corrections, right, being this paramilitary environment, the power structure has a significant influence on the way we operate, right? And so no one wants to be subordinate or insubordinate, right? No one wants to um in any way uh, skip through the chain of command and kind of be called out on that, right? And so I think when folks are empowered to make decisions closest to the issue, right? Like, and trusted to make the best decision, because I think that's part of it too, right? Because, like, I think it's the best case scenario, as you said, Ganj, that someone would call you, tell you the problem, and then you could say, oh, so what did you do to resolve the issue, right? The fact that they could feel comfortable to know that they could take an action, I think, is where the goodness comes in. And it's more a matter of just reporting out so that and that you're not blindsided by it. But in the instance where you do have a very robust hierarchy, and you've got to kind of move through all of the levels in the chain of command, it can make it very difficult for individuals to simply make a decision. And so I think the minimizing it is critical. Not that we have no responsibility to the chain of command, nor that we don't have to answer to the chain of command, but just that we're empowered to make decisions at our level. And while there might be greater implications, I think that's where the report out comes, right? So here's what I've been managing at this level. I've been dealing with it every day or whatever the situation is, but here's how I see this escalating. Now, at least it shows you handled it at your level, which was appropriate, and you're moving it up the chain of command as you should, because now the scope has grown. And I think being able to escalate is important as well, right? Like, because if you're involved in every aspect of everything, where do we escalate to? I got to go to commissioner for additional support now because I've already exhausted the chain of command internally. It shouldn't have to be that way. So I think when we do allow for individuals to have some autonomy, make decisions at that level, and allow them to explain and see that they are thinking more globally, they're thinking big picture, they can see the ripple effect of the decision. And so they're appropriately escalating it to you, because in this hierarchy, it's now time for you to be involved. I think that's where we know that we've fostered an environment where folks feel comfortable to get creative and make decisions on their own.
You guys forgive me, it makes some back noise. The water's circling around. I don't know if you hear it, a little
No, we can't hear
background
it.
noise. Okay, good, because it's circling around. But yeah, you're right. I think I've always tried to do my best to empower my people, which means that I want to eliminate things that provide too much of parameters. I think there's you could overshoot a little bit, because I think you could have things that are developed as a CYA or a liability, and then you wind up just overdoing it. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some times where it's needed. I'm not denying that, of course. But then there are times where we just get, crazy with it, and everybody just wants to memo stuff. And then we don't realize that we've putting a tighter, it's confined now. And now there's no room to maneuver. There's no freedom. So I think as you get higher up, the more that you start pushing down memos, it starts to tighten staff where one, staff doesn't move, but two, they become memo driven and they become reliant on the memos. I mean, I've seen people that I've worked with that have, now, by the way, when I was next to them as officers, I see things differently now. I used to work with people that were policy driven. Everything they did was defined by policy. And for me, when I was a rookie, I loved it. I thought their knowledge was crazy. I thought that was awesome. And I loved it. But then as I started to move up, now I want people to hear what I'm going to say, because I don't want this to be taken to the extreme. But I found out that when people are so defined by policy to that manner, policy becomes their backbone. So they're using policy as a safety net, because the policy is now making all the decisions for them. I have seen people that have caught into situations that weren't so defined by policy, and then they start to weaken up now because they have nowhere to go to figure something out. And what they do is they become the broken record, and they try to reiterate policy that doesn't apply, but that seems to be where their safety net is. Now, with that said, I've also seen people that they know policy, but they're not confined by it. Or they know, procedure, because I'm not changing the end game. The policy wants this to get done. That's where we're filtering our decisions from. So I mean procedure. They're not being held so much to the procedure, which allows some fluidity in case the concern that's happening falls outside of what the procedure is expecting. So again, I don't want to confuse policy and procedure, because policy is the end result, procedure is what gets us there, but we work in a world that's forever moving. So sometimes the procedures, they have to evolve, because again, pace of the outside meets the pace of the inside. You can't always stay at a slower pace when the world outside is moving quicker. So again, just to correct myself, but we get it. I don't want to mix up policy and procedure when they're two different things. It's the procedure. Sometimes you get people that get stuck in that, where they don't move and they're stagnant, like we mentioned. And then you get people that realize the situation. They're just good at thinking on the moment. They see what's coming their way, and they adapt and adjust. And when you're working with these hierarchies that don't allow that, and they try to define every parameter within whatever the concern may be, you don't allow for people to kind of maneuver if the case demands it, because they're going to wind up going back looking at a memo that really doesn't apply.
So you just made a case for how creativity, in order for us to foster creativity, we have to be very mindful of the leadership styles that are in place, right? Because someone who may be very creative and may be able to synthesize the policies, procedures, all that goodness into a situation and come up with, here's how we're going to get this done, may not work well with the authoritarian leadership style person, right? And so because they are so maybe ingrained in that leadership style, it may not allow for creativity in that facility, right? Like, and so, as much as like I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh my goodness. So as much as we know that creativity will be the fuel for how we evolve, I think as an institution, we have to recognize that there are some very autocratic leaders in this space, right? Which probably wouldn't allow for the creativity, for the passion to be fueled, right? And so, like, how do we? I mean, and I think that could probably be a different show, right? But
no, but you're right. I think it goes back into the safety of it all. If I got a leader that is very concerned, more paranoid, CYA constantly, you're going to fall into that where their safety becomes the policy. So remember, when I was new, I was very impressed by the people that knew policy at that level. I was like, that's crazy how well they know this all. And I saw it as a strength. But as I started to move up and you see things evolve, sometimes I go back and I argue with the people that are so resistant to moving forward. And then I find myself saying, guys, that procedure's not working. That procedure's not working. We got to try something different. No, it's like, yeah, you guys are trying to make a square fit into a circle. It no longer fits. I mean, so now as I look backwards with that perspective, I see that, don't get me wrong, I see the strength in that to some extent, but I also see that it could also be a weakness if the person is constantly falling back on that as safety to avoid making a decision. So here's the thing here, guys, when it comes to creativity, it is tough because at some point you're going to be breaking away from what you're used to something that's new, and in corrections, the biggest concern is, I'm going to take that. What's going to happen next if I go this route? I get it. But we also have to be wary of the people that stay constantly stuck in something that really no longer applies. And they're trying to squeeze it in because they become so comfortable with it. And then when you go to explain, like, hey, guys, I get that, but that's yesterday. We can't try that today. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter because hey, guys, listen, one last thing. You can still be creative through what we call change, because at the end of the day, you still stay connected to the core values of what we stand for, safety and security, all the good pieces of what corrections is about. But that comes along with you when you go to implement whatever we're evolving into or the change. I think a lot of times people, they're afraid of being creative or afraid of making changes because they feel somewhere along the line they lose out on what those core values are. Well, that's when we come in and say, hey, guys, we're willing to move forward, but from this foundation, Connie, from this. It's not that we're moving forward. You know what, Connie? It kind of goes back to what you said before about calculated creativity. Maybe what we meant to say was this. When it comes to that calculated creativity, the foundation never shifted. The foundation is the core values of what we operate on. So having said that, we're always building from those core values. For me, the safety and security side is always going to be a core value. If I find myself shifting from that, then you better come at me, because that
You just went muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Change to me is always going to be connected to those core values. That's true change, because that allows for the evolution of our failures and our successes to grow with us, because then you can learn, and we'll talk about that. But if you start breaking away from the core values, then I agree. Then that's where it becomes a little bit foolish, and that's where you may even get the good people who want to be creative to say, yo, Gan, just no, you can't do that.
Right.
We're not. So again, when you go to implement change, stay connected to the core values, and you get the people that want to tag along and help you. But if you break away from that, then even the people that want to be creative, like, nah, that's some foolish shit. So filter that creativity, like Connie said, through those core values, which was I think that was great, which is like the controlled creativity of it all, because it's still controlled. Yeah. So the next one, Connie, we'll have you go first on this. I'm going to read what he says. It's celebrate ideas. Now,
you need a B and you celebrate.
Oh, sorry. Celebrated. What happened there, Connie?
I don't know.
You know what? And you say this. Celebrate ideas. No, but you're right, because I'm glad you caught it, because we get that one troll.
Oh, God.
One troll will watch the whole episode, and all the get from was, Gangi, you spelled celebrate wrong. That's all you. Yeah. So what gets celebrated gets done. If you reward ideas with money, praise, and opportunity, that's not always easy here, but praise and opportunity could be. People will come to value ideas and work toward generating and sharing them. Yes, I do agree. I would love to get the money, but I can't promise that. But what I can promise are things that within my effort, opportunities if available, and praise is always within my efforts. But Connie, what you thought about that? Celebrating the ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan. That's positive reinforcement, right? We are celebrating the behavior that we want to see. We want to see people bringing ideas forward, ideas that are going to help us move forward as an institution, as a facility, whatever level you're at. The fact that you're bringing an idea forward, I think, is where the goodness comes in. And so we want to celebrate that, because we want more of that behavior, right? We want people to see that we are open to change. We are open to evolution. We are open to different opinions and different perspectives. And we're open to trying something that might not be what everyone thinks we should do. Maybe we've tried the same things over and over, maybe, and it didn't work. So now we're encouraging, like, I know, one facility I was at, like, they had a suggestion box, right? And like, if something they suggested, like a staff person suggested, actually resulted in like a positive change, like, that was celebrated. And like, I feel like and that person was recognized, right? Like this person came up with this idea and it was like a good thing to happen. So like I think the more that we celebrate those ideas, the more folks will feel comfortable to bring them forward.
And I think that kind of connects the fuel and the passion.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, as management, once you get that creativity, well, I guess, how I said we shift from maintaining to creative, but if you got that culture where it's creative, then, you want to maintain it. So I guess it kind of goes back and forth, a little fluctuates. But having said that, I think that's a great thing. Praise, specific appreciation, whatever it is, even in good and bad. I mean, I also think being constructive too, being constructive in people's efforts and let them know that, hey, and we'll get to that because there's another thing here. It talks about failing forward. But celebrating ideas to me is excellent because, and again, the best way to celebrate ideas is also listen to them. A lot of us come in thinking that our idea is the best one. And, you got to be able to listen to it. And then maybe together you can go from one good idea to one great idea. If you allow,
just imagine how celebrating one person's idea could boost their confidence.
Yeah.
Right. Like just to be celebrated. It's like, now I'm not afraid to make the next decision. Right now, I'm not afraid to like step in and build on the fact that like I had a good idea. Right. And like, this is what the outcome of that idea was. Right. And so even though the celebrating ideas can encourage everybody else, I'm just looking at, imagine the internal self-assurance that I now have, right? Like, yeah, look at what you were able to do. This is awesome. Now what's next, right?
I would actually
looking for what's next.
I want to compliment your thought there because I would actually say for supervisors that steal the ideas of their people, you're stopping innovation. No, what happens, Connie? Come up with an idea and and instead of the person sharing the, giving the credit where it goes, the person that communicates it upwards, they take onus of it as if it was theirs. And now the problem is that the person doesn't get the reward. And we've seen that, I've seen it in my career. I see it right now.
Yeah.
I see it right now. Off the record, I'll give you names.
But
I've seen it. I've seen someone make suggestions, and what the person does, he listens. And then who may add like a little tweak, and now the idea becomes fully theirs. It's like they'll listen. It's a great idea, but they're looking for a flaw so they can go ahead and take full credit for the ideas. And I know if there's people listening right now, we know those people where you go in, you got this great idea, and they're listening, but they're looking for the one flaw so they can go ahead and say, yeah, that person had a great idea, but I added some stuff, or that person had an idea, but I was able to fix it up, and so somehow or another, even if they give credit to the other person, it wasn't perfect until it went
credit, right?
Yeah, they get the credit. Such
and I mean, what's so stupid about that is that ultimately that doesn't motivate your team. Your team will probably never be motivated to be creative, to do anything like you. What did you call them in the beginning? They do just enough.
Oh, just enough employees.
Yeah. Then that's how you start to build your team of just enough, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're gonna do just enough because this clown is going to steal our ideas anyway.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. You get a person like that. You get a person like that. That any chance you could shine, they go ahead and, make the idea your own. Make the idea their own. It really is disheartening. It is because you got to give that. I would go so far as not even say recognition. I would say appreciation. So when you take someone's idea, you also take away their you're not giving them appreciation. Appreciation is about self-worth. So I take your idea, I just took away your worth, I took away your value. I mean, think about that. And there are people that do that. So you got to think about what you're doing. It's not just taking the idea. Because just in the opposite, like Connie said, you allow that person to feel something behind their idea working. That gives them value. Why would you want to take that away? Because if you take it away, it's my idea. The opposite happens. They lose value. It is very disrespectful, and I do see that happening a lot, even today. I do. And you usually get it from people that are just narcissistic, but also are power hungry. Yeah. Their name has to be behind everything. And again, at that point, you may have people that are creative. But they're not going to be creative for you, like Connie said. So they're going to do just enough only for you. And by the way, you want to hear something funny too, real quick? Just thinking of it right now. You're going to work with people that are decision makers that, of course, are going to be creative. It makes sense. They're next to the problem. So, of course, they're going to be creative because they're in the best position to figure it out. But there is some level of appreciation and recognition for being the supervisor that permits them to be creative. Because there's courage behind those supervisors, too, who are going to step up for them. Failure, success, whatever it is, they're going to step up. So there is something there for you as well. That's why I've always seen, like, I get it where, so let's say there's a recognition award. Again, recognition, external, whatever it is. But let's say there's a recognition or appreciation award happening, right? And you go ahead and show recognition for a team doing something successful. So here I am. I'm their immediate supervisor. Let's say it's Connie. Connie, that was a great idea, blah, 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 blah. Everything you decided was great. Well, and you get this recognition, right? And then the higher ups that are above me will give me the recognition to some extent, even though I'm going to push it off to Connie, but they'll give me some recognition for having the courage to say yes and standing by that employee as she reaches her greatest potential. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome to be recognized for being able to help an employee be their best.
Mm-hmm.
I see that more now. I mean, as I've grown into this position, I think that's a good chance to take advantage of the opportunity when, if you do want to recognize the supervisor for the courage of saying yes and allowing that employee to be creative. So now we have encourage courage. That popped out of creativity requires risk. This is what Connie talked about in the car. So I want to have Connie go first because we want to balance this with risk and creativity. So creativity requires risk, and taking risk requires courage. As a leader, you need to model it and encourage it. And then he says, as Daniel R. Dennison of IMD Business School said, there's always a premium on being able to deal with the unknown. People will venture there if they feel they'll be secure in doing it. It's the leader's job to create this sense of security. We kind of touched on that. Would you agree already?
Yeah, we talked about that. I mean, I think it's, of course, important that we encourage folks to have the courage to take the risk, right? Like, when you were reading that, I love this movie. So I was thinking about Top Gun Maverick,
the movie.
Where you've never seen it?
I love it. Great movie.
I absolutely love it. So I was thinking about where he was pushing the engine to go further, faster.
To get through that whatever it is.
Whatever the thing was that whatever they needed to get through, right? Yeah. So, in my mind, I'm just thinking sometimes we don't know what our limits are, or we think we know our limits until we actually push a little bit, right? And so I think knowing that, yes, there's an expectation that you work within X parameters, but maybe if I take it one more step, right, we may see the result that we're looking for. And someone has to have the courage to kind of take that step. And so I feel like, yes, there are some outcomes that we never want, right? Like, we don't want inmates dying, right? We don't want an escape. There are certain things we want to never have happen in facility. And so we're going to follow policy procedure to make sure those things don't happen. But if they don't have like those dire if they don't have those dire outcomes, I think it is okay to encourage the staff to be courageous.
No, but you're right. I mean, that's the key. But again, that goes back to the supervisor. I guess having the courage to permit that. I like that, because that will encourage staff to also be courageous. And as we talked about safety and stagnation, obviously that's, it will encourage people to push past that and start moving. Guys, in corrections, the world is moving. You can't stand still. So sometimes you have to ask yourself, and maybe more in general, but am I standing still when everything else around me is moving? And if so, where do I go next? Because you can't stand still in corrections. I'm sorry, guys, you can't. I mean, every year I go to a conference and there's something new that's being implemented, and at one point it's like, man, I feel like some of these things people are wanting to put their name on, and I get it, but I also admire the effort too. because
Mhm.
some of them are pushing old things. Don't get me wrong. But then there are some that just every year they just have a different presentation on a topic that is within their giftedness. And every year they're not, there are some that will present the same thing that's 20 years old. I get it. But then there are some that aren't. And every year they're adding something. And it's just an effort to, just stay with the times.
Which is a beautiful thing. I think
It's a beautiful
that's
thing.
just the world around us is constantly evolving, right? Like you made me think about I remember having a meeting with my custody leadership one day because an inmate had come in with a hearing aid. This hearing aid was it was digital, but it wasn't Bluetooth enabled or anything like that. It was just a hearing aid. And so we had gone through all of the measures to make sure there was nothing that could be pulled apart, all the safety stuff and such. And I remember someone saying, like, no, we're not letting them have the hearing aid. I'm like, so we want to go back to the old analog, like hearing aids where they struggle to hear, and we know the security issue created with that. But what it made me think about is like, so now we have hearing aids that are Bluetooth enabled, right? We have hearing aids that have all these things, right? And so as the world is changing around us, it doesn't matter if we don't want to evolve. Like things are still changing. I mean, every time you talk about the JPay, you talk about these tablets, I'm like, just to think, like there was a time where they just had a Walkman.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're not going to be able to stop the changes around the world, but like we do have to continue to be creative to keep up with it. I was just watching something about AI the other day, and I'm like, I wonder how AI is going to impact facilities, right? Like at some point, I mean, you think about Face Off all those years ago, right? Face Off with
Nicolas Cage
and John Travolta,
yeah,
right?
Travolta.
And being able to track the inmates and all the stuff, and like we've got companies now that have all this technology out here. And Face Off is a really old movie.
Yeah.
So at some point, some of this technology is going to start coming into facilities, and what will it look like then? Right?
Yeah, I love what you're saying because we kind of touched on it before, but if there is change and people are being creative, again, you go back and make sure it doesn't violate our core values.
Right.
Because that's the only time for me I'm a little resistant, because if I see that, hey, there's no way that blends into what we've been doing. Like it just totally. So I like to see us, if this makes sense, I like to see us as a tree branching out.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. And that's going to be constant. But then there's some times where I feel people want to cut down the tree. That's a problem to me. Yeah. Like I'm not ready for that. I don't want that. I believe the tree has a good foundation. That's where everything's growing from. So the moment you cut down the tree, to me, that's an official reset. And it's not
value in the tree.
Right? There's always
the tree is still bearing fruit. It's not like the tree is now rotten or it's it's withering away. It's actually still a pretty sturdy foundation and tree growing still. So I could see that, right? Like we don't want to throw away everything, right? Because I feel like we've learned so much over the years, and so to throw away everything would be a disservice to us.
Yeah, I mean, think about this, Connie. I agree. In your efforts to learn, of course, you're learning in an effort to evolve. You always are, but there's always something that you have to remember is your direction in that learning. So my thing is the core values has always been my destination, my direction. So wherever we're going in our effort to learn, I always got to make sure that we're headed in this direction. The moment I feel that we're way off here, yes, I'm going to be one of those people that are also going to be resistant, because I do have certain things that I hold dear, but it still allows me to grow as an individual, but I won't shake from. So again, I'm still willing to grow. Don't get me wrong, but there are certain things that I hold dear, I value. And for me, it's always going to be safety and security. I'm not willing to shift so much. But mind you, safety and security is not an excuse for me to stop moving. It never has been. I just want to find out if there's a way that it can get involved. And when I find that there's no way that safety and security can exist in this measure, then I don't want it. Like I'm willing to push it into a measure, and let's see where we go. I'm not willing. It's never going to be an excuse not to try. But can we make it happen? No. We tried to. Okay, then fine, guys. I'm sorry, man. I get you want to do it, but this not going to work for me. I disagree. So I love what you're saying. I don't believe in cutting down the tree when it comes to change. So I want to look at.
Sometimes it takes time, right? Because I was looking at something the other day and they were talking about like the evolution of a business, right? It takes almost 15 years to change the culture of an institution. And I was like, really? That's a long time, right?
Then you're changing it again.
To myself, it happens eventually, right? Like whether we are actively a part of that process to help us evolve, or if we're sitting back stagnant, digging our heels in, either way, the evolution is coming. And I think it's for us to decide where we want to be in the process, right? Do you want to be a part of that creativity, or do you want to be one of those that are still digging your heels in and watching things evolve around you?
Let me add that, because you're right. So, because does fall into creativity, because creativity is evolving. So my thing will always be, as we move forward, there's two things. I want to know where we're headed, but I also want to know what we're leaving behind. That's important to me too. And why? But so those two things have to be answered for me before I'm going ahead to, okay, where are we going? Fine. And what are the sacrifices I have to make to get there? Because there are certain things, maybe I'll sacrifice, but there's certain things I won't. I'm willing to sacrifice surface stuff, but I'm not willing to sacrifice core values. And I feel that there have been some changes that have been done that have sacrificed core values. And all of a sudden you're going to see me on things saying, oh, this is bullshit, blah, 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 blah. And then people like, look at this guy doesn't embrace change. No, hold on. I'm all about change. But this is bullshit. This is really attacking us. This isn't change. This isn't evolution. This is attacking us by cutting us off. It's funny because a lot of us, we get blinded, or people in management sometimes get blinded by the pressures of outside change, where they're looking to literally cut the core values out, and it's like, well, I'm not for that. Well, you don't embrace something new. That's not new, guys. That's foolish. Connie, you said it best. I was going to go back to that controlled creativity. If you break away from those core values, then to me, that's where the risk is greatest. And that's where even people that are creative are going to say, yeah, man, I'm not for that. So again, when you're implementing creativity, know that foundation and then build from that. Yeah. So 3 more left.
We got 3.
There's 3 more left. Don't, Connie, stay awake. This one's a good one. I wanted to use this. Fail forward. He goes, I once saw a sign that said, company motto, we make new mistakes. I love that. I'm a huge supporter of the idea of failing forward, so much that I wrote an entire book on the subject, and I read the book. It's a good book. If you fall down, you should learn from it. Get up, step forward. Anytime you learn what doesn't work, you're a step closer to what does work. Forward is obvious. Failing forward is great. Obviously, success. You don't want to get stuck in past successes. We talked about that. But failing forward allows for humility. And I think failing forward also allows for progress. So, we should be willing, and again, in a safety and controlled environment, we shouldn't be afraid of failure. And again, it goes back to cultivating an environment that we can trust, and cultivate an environment where people feel empowered. Because again, innovation is going to have failures, and we don't grow. And my biggest concern is if we get concerned with failure that it holds us back, then we're never going to keep up with the pace that we need to keep moving and being productive. But failing forward, I love that, because obviously the opposite of that would be failing backwards, which is not what we want to do. I think you could fail forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least with failing forward, we know that you're trying new things, right? And I think that's it, right? Like, okay, I tried something different. It worked. It didn't work. All right, I tried something different. It worked. It didn't work. And I think that's the goodness of that failing forward, is that you're continuing to try new things and you're building on those failures and getting closer to the success.
Connie, I've done that. What's funny is I'll have inmates that will understand policy and procedure better than most of us ever will, because they study it for loopholes. Okay, they do,
Right.
which I wish we would more so, but they study it for loopholes. And there are some times where they know it so well that they got us. They got us. We get stuck. Priya could be a big thing when it comes to that,
Mm.
where they know that
Mhm.
if they make false allegations, it could lead to the separation of staff. And, so when I feel that I'm being trapped by policy and procedure, because again, it forces us to do that. And the inmate knows that they're controlling our actions through policy and procedure. Again, you could teach staff not to be manipulated, but then you get policies that don't allow to circumvent these loopholes. Again,
Mhm.
hey guys, if you're watching this, you're creating policy. Remember, people are going to look at it to manipulate loopholes, just like they do for laws. So be careful, because if you're not looking at it with a fine tooth comb. But having said that, when I feel that we're being controlled by policy and procedure to a point where, man, there's not really much I can do, I bring everybody to the table and we discuss everything from every different perspective, and we commit ourselves to action. And sometimes it doesn't work, but having said that, we get closer to what it is that we need to do. So the failure is still moving us forward. We're never falling backwards. The backwards would be the indecision part, because guys, you could fail even if you don't make a decision.
Yeah.
So you might as well make a decision and move forward. So I mean that's the key here, is that you bring the people to the table and say, this inmate's controlling us right now through this fucking policy. So with that said, we make a decision and we fail forward because we'll get one step closer, or we don't, and we allow this person to do it every day, and our failure to make a decision will start setting us backwards, because guess what happens next? The other inmates will try.
Yeah.
So the decision kind of helps us. Okay, so 2 more. Start small, Connie. What's your thoughts on that? He says here, too often we want huge breakthroughs and innovation when we should be looking for small ones. If you want one great idea, look for a lot of good ideas. If you want to create something significant, build it in small increments. Do that consistently and you make creative progress.
I like it.
Powerful.
I like it. I mean, here's the thing, right? What are the small changes that we could be making to, I mean, like, you're working on something right now, which I think is awesome, but that's also a small change, right? Like, to give staff a voice, right? Like, I think that's an amazing thing to do, right? In a time where it's like, I gave you an order, just go follow through,
Yeah.
right? Versus your opinion matters, your voice counts. Like, that's a huge message to be sending to the staff. And that's a small change, right? But what is the tremendous impact that small change could have?
Yeah.
And right, and like, how do you build on that small change and add on to that, which makes it an even better and more inclusive work environment? I love it.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that just now, but you're right. The process that we're trying to do to get their voice lifted is really, we're trying to find creative ways, and you're right. It's one step at a time. We're doing surveys, we're doing open houses, open up newsletters for them to communicate their voices, maybe possibly doing videos of training where you can have senior people pass out some advice to create a little bit of a legacy or a hand down. But you're right. I mean, and then there's successes in the small things. I remember watching a movie, since we're talking about movies, I thought this was great. I love this movie called The Story of Us. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bruce Willis, Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yep.
And Michelle Pfeiffer, her job is crossword puzzles. She makes them. If you remember that. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And she says something about crossword puzzles that I remember this because it stuck with me, was that you may never know the answers to the big things in life, but sometimes knowing the smaller things could be rewarding. So for her, solving the crossword puzzles, they're called crossword puzzles, right?
Yeah.
We fill in the boxes. Yeah.
Yep.
Because what's the other word search, right? Crossword puzzles.
Right.
There's something about a reward of solving the smaller things. Like, I may not be able to solve the biggest things in life, but like, why am I here and all this other stuff? But there's something with solving these smaller things. And again, through time, it matters. I mean, every day in corrections, you're solving small problems because it could turn into something big. I mean, trust me, you don't run a prison based on assumption. And guys, think about it from another perspective. Think about the snowball effect. You know how things start small and they roll into something bigger? Well, think about it from the other perspective, from the positive side of things. Start small, that could also roll into something bigger. Momentum could be positive. So what they're talking about here is the slippery slope is all about momentum. Which way is the momentum going? Is it going to negative or is it going to the positive? And if you start small and start building it up, you could create a hell of a difference, even if it's a year or two down the line, but it does take patience. I mean, and also one last thing for that. If you're doing it for the right reasons, you don't mind starting small because you're not looking for recognition. You're just looking to do what's right. I think a lot of people that go to jump the gun, because as we're thinking about this thing I was getting into, or I'm into now, you could jump and try to get everybody at once in this effort to really just broadcast what you're doing, but you're going to fail because it's too big of a step. You haven't really prepared yourself by going through the small steps, going through some little minute failures or whatever it is to really try to create the best approach or the better approach if you keep the infinite game in mind. But having said that, the smaller steps allows, as I said, for those the things to be, as smoothed out as possible before you try to launch it big. So I agree. And for the people that just try to jump on things right away and push it out as quick as possible, that's recognition.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when you're really fueled by passion and you're trying to make a real difference, you're going to take your time. You're going to do those small things because the small things count. You're going to take the steps that you need to take in order for your changes to be sustainable. When people take these big leaps, who's keeping up with that? Right? But like when you've made those smaller steps and you've got those smaller victories along the way, like people are actually taking those things and running with it. Right. And those are the things that last. Those are the things that people remember. That one big splash you made is just that, a one big splash.
Well, what's funny about that too is as I was leaving work, before we get to our last one, I was talking to an officer, and as I get closer to the end of my career, it's like, what did I want? And I just said, I kind of want to be remembered. But here's the funny thing. For me, position, I don't want to be remembered by position. I want to be remembered by what I did for someone else, to be honest with you. When I was an officer, it was more of my impact with the MA population. There's value there. And as I moved up, it's my impact with the staff. I mean, those are the moments you look back that really put value in your life when you're getting ready to retire, and the position doesn't matter because in a few days that position holds no weight. But what will be of value is when you leave that building one day and years later people still talk about you, because I've seen it. I've seen it, and in good ways. I mean, yeah, there's people they talk about negative, but in good ways, where I mean, I love it, I hate it, but it's kind of conflicted. But when people say, when you coming back to this facility, because yeah, I love it because it shows that you're appreciated, but it's also sad because obviously something's happening right now in which there's some value lost. So it's very conflicted because I love it on a personal level, but on a team level, I hate it. So I feel good, but I just, and then also you kind of feel selfish when you tell them, I don't want to go back there.
Why are you whispering?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. What the fuck?
You feel selfish. I don't want to go back. You're telling the whole world about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for a second, I didn't want people listening. So you're right. How stupid was that? Damn, Caius. I spelled words wrong, and now this? What the hell's
oh, get out of here.
Yeah. All right. Last one. Do you remember the word I spelled wrong?
Celebrate.
Damn it. Women never forget. We'll let you do something nice. I told Connie today I loved her today. She doesn't remember that, but she's quick to point out that. No, I spelled celebrate. You forgot the B.
Give me a break. You sent me that text just before I was like, oh, I gotta go and get food. And I'm like, you sure? You like, yes.
No, well, you don't work. I mean, yeah. And then it was funny. It's like, so I spelled B wrong. I was waiting for you to say, well, Gangi, maybe it's missing the B because you're being one. Whoa, Connie. All right, hold on. Yeah, because that's the face.
Oh
That's
God.
the face you had. That's what it was. The face at the beginning.
Oh Lord.
This is I'm going to give you a little bit of a Gangi original. It's actually in my book, Officer to Admin. Reduce rules. Well, let me give you John Maxwell first. Author Henry David Thoreau wrote, "Any fool can make a rule, and every fool will mind it. Creativity gets stifled when everyone expends too much energy worrying about following rules. Too many rules cause idea anemia." General Douglas MacArthur said, "You're remembered for the rules you break." I like that idea. Granted, don't take that to the extreme, but there's a lot of powerful thought in that. But see it for what it's meant to be. To in context of being created, not being stifled by defined plans in a world that doesn't always have a defined route for you to take. But I want to mention something too. I do this thing with rules versus expectations. I find expectations really relates to an individual. It builds a connection with them, and rules go right back to the position and what you have to enforce. I realized that when I oversaw the inmates. I would try to enforce rules, and they could give two shits about the rules. But when I went up and said, "Hey, this is what you could expect from me. This is what I expect from you," I felt there was something internal that they would want to work with. And I know that for a fact because the females at the time, the inmates, they would strive and they would meet it, and then they would set back, but they felt a certain way about it. The only thing that had to shift at that time was eventually you're not doing it for me, you're doing it for you. And I felt that there was a little bit more of an effort to meet expectations as opposed to meet the rules, because the expectations are for me. The rules are for you. So how do I shift that? I shift that by saying, "Hey, do this for you. And in return, I'll meet with my expectations." So yeah, I do believe that in an effort to reduce the rules, have some level of expectations, I do believe it allows for people to be creative because it gives them something to filter from, but gives them the freedom to make decisions, as opposed to rules could be very limiting. Because as I said, I mean, the more rules you have, well, you know what it is? Let's just do it this way. Because we did talk about parameters. Maybe it's when it's layered upon layered upon layered upon layered. You get a rule that allows for some flexibility, and then all of a sudden they layer something on top of it, like a memo. And then they layer something on top of that to the point where the person can't move. So, here's the what. Okay, Connie, I need you to handle this. And here's 5 memos connected to that and how it has to be done. There's no freedom there. So it's more of here's the expectation. Let's do it this way, Connie. Here's the expectation of what I want done. And then you figure out the how. Or the other route would be, here's the expectation, and now here's 5 layers of rules built on top of each other that now literally says to you, well, any fool can do this now. There's nothing here for me to enjoy in doing this work because there's no decision that needs to be made. How do I feel empowered if everything has been decided for me?
Right. You don't. And I think, the rule makers have to recognize, like, the intention behind the rules is to keep the organization running efficiently, right? And so when we start layering the rules, we take away efficiency, right? Like, yeah, are we trying to prevent certain happenings? Are we trying to prevent reoccurrences of things? Because that's usually why some rule has been changed, right? Some rule was changed 10 years ago because somebody wore a purple sneaker down the road, and this was the outcome of the purple sneaker. So now this is part of the rules, where it's like, that was such a one-off, right? Is that how we should build policy and procedure and build the rules? Because now we're building on event after event after event. And while some, I think, have those safety security implications that we always want to protect ourselves and the staff from, but then there's some things that, like, we haven't revisited since 1976, right? And like, it's time for us to revisit it because it makes us run as an institution ineffectively and inefficiently. And so we don't want to change it because we don't want to be the person to reduce the rules, right? And then next week something happens and it's like, who changed the policy? Who changed the procedure? When did that happen, right? It was there for a reason. We get it, but it hasn't happened in 40 years, right? But this is still something that we're steadfast on. And so how do we really do some true revamping of the rules so that they're effective and that staff can actually do their jobs and do it efficiently?
Yeah, when you said efficiently, I quickly wanted to look up efficiency versus effectiveness. I thought that would be interesting. So obviously it is something that people do look up, because as soon as I put efficiency versus effectiveness came up. And it says efficiency is the ability to produce an intended result in the way that results in the least waste of time, effort, and resource. Effectiveness is the ability to produce a better result, one that delivers more value or achieves a better outcome. I think effectiveness allows for more creativity. Because if you're looking at something that's efficiency, it looks like it's divine. It's from here, it's defined by least waste of time, effort, and resources. So it's more about restriction, where effectiveness allows for the ability to produce a better result, one that delivers more value or achieves a better outcome. So it's not limited. It's not limited by the restrictions of lesser time. I mean, I'll be honest with you guys, time frames are probably superficial anyway, arbitrary, because I put a time.
Resources aren't, right? So when we think about efficiency, we are an institution that is starved for resource.
And maybe that's one of the flaws of us trying to evolve in facilities that can't afford the resources, because now they're struggling just to be efficient because things are limited.
Right.
Maybe, and be honest with you, it's funny because we're always constantly fighting for more. What's funny? Hold on. This is actually a whole topic in itself, but just to touch it on here, I've always said, guys, we need these resources, whatever it is, more vests, whatever it is, more people, staff, and whatever it is, so we could be more effective. And they come back and it's kind of like, yeah, but the facility still has to operate on the limitations we have to be more efficient.
But they say need is the mother of invention, right? So when we are operating from this space where we don't have the resources, it forces us to get
be creative,
right? It forces us to get creative. And, maybe in some of these spaces where folks have gotten very creative while they're trying to navigate limited resources, there's possibility that there's ideas that aren't being celebrated.
Oh, yeah. Connie, I agree. I agree with you 100%. I think that, obviously there are things we need to operate on, but yeah, I mean, I even said even about the inmates, the people like, well, how do inmates get things when they're in close custody units? I said, guys, the more restrictive you give them, the more innovative they become.
Yeah, the more creative they're going to get.
So we're always stepping above. And then, and if you're not giving officers vests, they come out with the phone books. Remember the old school?
Oh, yeah.
We still have them in some of our facilities. That becomes their vest, not protected anywhere else but the gut. You know what I mean? But yeah, this was a good. I mean, I think we could explore effective versus efficiency, because I just remember, like, I'm always kicking back effectiveness, and someone will come back, and when they kick back efficiency, it's like cost cutting. So I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think efficiency does put a little bit of a limit that keeps you more defined, where when you're looking to be effective, you explore more, because for me, time frames, I think they're arbitrary anyway. Like, I mean, what's a priority should never shift over what's urgent. Like if this is a priority, all of a sudden you put a time frame and now this urgent thing, but it's still not a priority. A time frame to me, it doesn't shift the priority. I'm sorry. If this was a priority, I'm working on this, and someone from the outside comes in and says, well, we need this done within a day, that's got to wait, because my priorities haven't shifted because you put a time frame on this. So I think that was this was a good dialogue. Can you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
I guess in closing, I would just say that, we can't operate from a space of fear, right? Like, we're doing our best to do the best job that we can do in the facilities. And sometimes it's going to call for us to step out the box. And I think as managers, I would hope that we would encourage staff to step out of a box, that we would proactively have some of these conversations that gives them the permission to get creative when things get tough, right? As opposed to having to run everything through multiple levels of chains of commands in order to get to this position, this point where the staff feels comfortable to actually just make a decision. I mean, I think cognitive safety is really important, and that you only feel that when you trust your leadership. I feel safe to say what I want to say and to come up with bright ideas and such and express those ideas because I know my leadership is listening, and I trust that they're going to hear me out, right? And know that I'm coming with the best of intent. Like I'm not trying to come to like set the building on fire, right? So I just say to folks, yes, sometimes we get discouraged, but don't allow the fuel for your passion to be extinguished by folks who aren't progressive in their thought process.
And guys, if you want more of Connie's thoughts, she's got the book that's out, Cages Are Cocoon. There she is. And then you got the Civilian Corrections Academy and the information on there. Call her 860-740-2269. Do you answer that phone?
I do.
Wait, is that your phone number?
No.
Okay, I didn't just give out your cell phone number, did I?
No, that's not. No, that's on the flyer.
I'm just making sure. Hold on.
That's not my cell phone number.
Because there'll be some people that may want that.
Oh,
no, you never know, Connie.
No, looking at some of those comments sometimes, I'm like, oh, geez.
Yeah. Connie, you look beautiful today. Thank you. Really beautiful right now. What the fuck? What the hell happened with that? Am I like Connie?
I know. No, you're not lying. I'm like, what am I supposed to say to this?
And that's on freaking the YouTube. That's in the YouTube comments. You know what I mean?
God.
Hey, that picture's not for me on the show. You know what I mean? Guys, just my closing thoughts. Listen, me and Connie, before we had the dialogue, we always have to be wary of the extreme. There's always going to be people that take the dialogue and bring it to the extreme that, Gangi said be creative, but in this environment, you can't, because of the risk. Guys, obviously there's certain things that you don't mess around with, especially if you're really falling on that final fail safe. But again, we haven't gotten this far in this profession without evolving and for people to kind of take the risk. And I think the one thing about this profession, especially now, is that we're moving forward and we need people to come up with better ideas. That's why I'm also part of an initiative that says your voice counts. I mean, when your voice counts, it's really to say, this is where we're going. How can you help us get there? Tell us. We need your help, not to give us a bunch of excuses of why we can't do things when we know we have to. Again, pace outside is moving, and we have to move with it. So we don't want people that, don't understand that concept, first off, and then also stop us from moving forward. Remember that. I mean, we're willing to listen, but at the end of the day, I got to get to someone else because I can't control the outside world. So the world is still moving. And right now we missed the train because you were telling me things that were holding us back. So being creative is key. And I think this is a great way to look at it. And management also having a level of responsibility when it comes to cultivating trust. And as we said, letting your team feel valued by giving them the respect or the recognition or the appreciation when they come up with something new and creative. So as always, guys, love you guys. The show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.